So first off, I will just introduce myself. My name is Emily Masching. I'm the Director of Product at Ripen. Daniela Pico is our Director of External Relations at Ripen, and Emma Talbot is our Strategic Policy Analyst. So the three of us today should be answering all your questions. I will be the one doing all the talking unless I have an unexpected internet outage or something of that nature, which we hope will not happen. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I just wanted to let you all know the session will be recorded and you will all automatically receive a copy in case you would like to share that with any colleagues. Today's session is really going to be tailored primarily for people coming to us from academic institutions, whether you're in career services or you run a placement program. If you are an employer representing another organization, welcome. We are absolutely happy to have you. I did just want to let you know in advance, we will be running an employer-focused webinar on April 16th, which I'll explain a little bit more about later. Okay, so we are at 9:02 and I can see we have 227 people on the line, which is incredible. So I don't want to keep you waiting. I will get started here and share my screen. Oops. Daniela, can you just give me a signal that you can view this in full screen? Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, again, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. What we'll be discussing today are virtual internships, placements, and co-ops, creating remote work experiences for learners. Today's session will be focused on some general tips and best practices for virtual internships in the current time, and then we will also discuss how you can run these on Ripen, and allow approximately 20 minutes towards the end of the session for any questions that come up through the chat. A little background about Ripen. I know many of you on the call have already spoken to us and are familiar with our platform, but I wanted to provide a little context for those who are not. Ripen is an experiential learning platform primarily for higher education. Our platform has been used to facilitate 45,000 student experiences since 2016. More than 1,000 instructors have used Ripen to connect students with real company projects through our platform. We have a network of over 10,000 employers we are able to reach, and we have more than 3,300 project descriptions from employers currently live on our platform. So the reason we're all here today is to discuss how Ripen can support virtual placements. We're offering our platform at no cost to higher education institutions until the end of August 2020 to allow you to use our platform for this purpose. You do not need to be an existing client of Ripen. We will be happy to work with all comers. So as those of you who know Ripen well may know, our focus to date has primarily been on the in-class environment, so on facilitating experiential learning opportunities that are part of students' curriculum. We are extending this, so this is actually something we have done over the years. We have worked with career services and with placement providers to offer virtual or even in-person placements sourced through our platform, while our focus has been on the curriculum side. We are shifting that focus a little bit this summer in response to the huge demand that we are seeing from educational institutions to develop virtual placements. So while product changes will be expected, and that is one of the reasons why I'm leading today's session, we're making some product changes to really support this. I'll be explaining how you can use the Ripen platform as it is today to source and manage virtual placements. Oh, and point of terminology, I have chosen to use the word virtual internships because employers understand it and just for the sake of brevity, but this does apply to placements, practicums, and co-ops that can be made virtual as well. First off, a little bit of background. I know you're all quite familiar with this, but I think it will provide some useful context to the next few slides about the current situation. So of course, with the COVID-19 crisis and offices going virtual, we have been made aware of some employers canceling planned in-person placements. General state of affairs, most employers who have partnered with higher education institutions very much want to maintain a positive relationship with those schools, and they want to maintain a positive impression of their brand on campus. Based on what we've been hearing from our partners, I understand that it is by no means all employers who are canceling placements. One partner gave us the estimate that approximately 10% of existing placements that were planned for in-person have been canceled instead of being converted to virtual. But compounding that issue is the fact that a lot of employers would now be registering or would now be confirming for summer placements, and they're not doing so because they're in a state of such uncertainty. So the main factors impacting our employers here are the uncertainty about the future, not knowing at which date their offices will reopen and what the impact will be on their business. Some of them have already had staff changes due to layoffs or internal transition of roles. Many of them are reducing their budgets, trying to cut any costs possible. And some of them are just unfamiliar with remotely onboarding and training an employee. So this may cause them some hesitation in switching from an in-person placement to a virtual one. And again, I just want to emphasize this is not universal. You will have a lot of your employers who have happily converted to virtual and who are comfortable with remote training and onboarding. These employers are fantastic, but what this session is going to be for is bringing on new employers and how to make the experience a little bit easier for them. And actually, first off, sorry, I did just want to make one point because I know this will come up, paid versus unpaid. So Ripen does support both paid and unpaid experiences. So you can absolutely use our platform to promote a paid experience, whether that's through an hourly wage or a stipend. We are also fine with unpaid as long as it's coming from the institution. So it's not an employer posting an unpaid job, but it's the institution who has an unpaid placement or internship that is actually part of the academic programming and usually for credit. So I would just briefly describe that as we support paid internships and unpaid for credit internships. So addressing those four main issues that employers are currently facing are four strategies that we have to help create a more scalable experience for employers at the current time. The four aspects, one of these is very obvious: virtual work, flexible hours, considering team-based experiences, and focusing on a project-based placement rather than an open-ended one. So I'll expand on each one of these points. Firstly, by necessity, most institutions are now planning for virtual placements for any spring and summer placements. Some of our employers may expect and hope to be open in the summer, but it's really, really difficult to plan for that without knowing any exact date. So it's best at this point to assume that all placements through to the end of August at least will be virtual. If some of these can convert to in-person, we may consider that a bonus. Secondly, flexible hours. I know a lot of institutions are already leading the charge on this. Co-op has relaxed the hourly requirement somewhat. Some 240-hour placements may have now been reduced to 120. Schools are being flexible as much as possible, and this is something that employers will really appreciate. It can be hard for them to make a multi-month commitment under these conditions of uncertainty, but it will be easier for them to commit to a somewhat shorter placement. Another aspect of this is potentially offering flexibility between full and part-time. So if ordinarily your placements might have been full-time for 4 weeks, instead consider doing the same number of hours over 3 months to allow both the employer and the student some choice between whether that is full or part-time. Thirdly, and I do know this isn't possible in every program, but I would strongly urge you to consider team-based internship experiences. So this is something we've seen be really interesting and successful with some institutions. I'll show you an example a little bit later. This is, of course, a fantastic option for scale when we're in a situation where there is a shortage of placements. So if your program structure allows it, create a small team of students who are all working on a single virtual placement or project. And these can even be multidisciplinary groups, which is an exciting proposition for some employers as well. So bringing multiple students together to work on a single internship project can be a great approach to help make a smaller pool of employers go further. And then fourth, I think this is the most important part, and I will spend a little bit more time on this, is proposing a project-based placement rather than an open-ended one. So there's a few reasons for this, but providing a central project to the internship creates clearer expectations for both parties. The intent here really is for the employer to provide a very large project to the student, of course, depending on the number of hours required from your placement, that becomes the central project or focus of the student's placement. So we do understand and expect that duties may evolve beyond that project, especially when it's a longer placement. Different things will come up, and that's great. That's part of what makes the placement style experience. But speaking as somebody who has both been remotely supervised and has been a remote supervisor, it is more difficult to consistently provide work to a remote employee. So when a student is embedded in the physical office space, it's very easy for an employer to see, oh, they finished that task, I'll hand them some additional work. And it's much more easy and natural for that student to ask for help or ask for additional work as they need it. When the student is remote, it really helps to have a focal project for their internship. So even if they're given some additional duties and tasks, they can always fall back to that central project. And we'll use the Ripen project page to really define and scope out the nature of that project. It's a little bit extra effort required up front from the employer to scope out that project, though I would argue possibly no more than a traditional job description. So they spend that little bit of time up front really scoping out that project and considering what the students need to complete the particular project. And then it gives both parties a lot more certainty about the work that's going to be done over the course of the placement. It can also really help to actually provide, to actually increase interest in the placement, because the employers can really understand, oh, this is what the concrete outcome of this virtual placement is going to be. I listed 2 examples there on the right of the screen, but of course these would have to be fleshed out substantially. A lot more detail would be needed. An internship project should be pretty meaty, so it should be a large project and there should be sufficient details for the students to begin working on it semi-independently. Oh yes, and I did want to mention one point here, because we're often asked how Ripen might differ from a job board or other platforms that help source internships. So this is one of the key differences really, is that we do facilitate a project-based internship approach. We also offer the tools to manage the project throughout, so to track the progress of that project and manage feedback in our platform as well. Most of our clients actually do use Ripen in addition to a career management platform such as a Handshake or Simplicity. The difference between those and Ripen is very much educator driven. So the educator forms the experience and companies apply to it, while those platforms will be more industry led. I think this will make a little bit more sense when I get into showing you the platform demo. So next up, just a few general pointers on quality of virtual internships. I think we all, in some cases, have a preference for in-person placements, but in many ways, a virtual internship can still provide a very similar experience and provide a high-quality work immersion experience for the student. One important feature, of course, is mentorship and supervision. Just like in an in-person placement, the intern should have a dedicated contact with their company. That dedicated contact is available to the intern when they have questions and has regular check-ins with them. Secondly, even though they are virtual, there should be a sense of immersion in the workplace. The intern should be treated like an employee. They should be introduced to the company. They should participate in internal meetings and communication. This particular aspect, it's hard when there's just one person remote, but when everyone is remote, it's a lot easier to do this. And especially for placements starting more towards the summer, a lot of organizations will have figured out their virtual workplace much better by then. Thirdly, students should be working on tasks that are meaningful for the organization. So we wouldn't use Ripen for students to work on hypothetical projects. It should be something that has real value to that company, and not something like data entry either. It should be something that relates back to their programming and that allows them to apply the skills that they've learned in class to real-world tasks and activities. Finally, all of these things give the student to practice professional communication, project management, and other really key workplace skills. Even little things like scheduling a meeting with colleagues, running a Zoom meeting, that's going to be really useful exposure for students that they will still get in the virtual workplace. I did want to mention there are a lot of really great resources out there. CWIL recently published some great resources for remote onboarding and training of students, and I would definitely recommend checking those out. We can circulate them in our follow-up email. But there are a lot of great resources out there about how employers can effectively hire, onboard, train, and keep remote employees engaged. There are a few best practices I won't spend too much time on. As I mentioned, there are other resources out there for that. One of the best practices we highly recommend is to provide both a primary and a backup contact for the project. So this is something that Ripen also helps facilitate. Our projects can have multiple administrators who are tagged to each project. It should absolutely be done that the communication channels are established up front. Ripen messages would be the option that is the default. So a Ripen message chat is automatically launched when the student starts the project. And a rhythm for check-ins should be established before the placement begins. You can also take it off to different communication channels as desired by the employer and the student. Thirdly, it's very important not to neglect the human element. So in order for that feeling of workplace immersion to take place, for the student to still be welcomed to the company, for them to be introduced to multiple team members and not just a single contact, we really want the student to feel as much as possible that they are a part of the company they are doing this virtual placement with. For educators, it's still very important to reconfirm commitments with employers. I think everyone who runs a placement knows that with employers, after they apply, it's still important to make sure that they truly understand their obligation and commitments to the student, not just things like payment, but that they understand like the amount of time they'd be expected to spend with them and that sort of thing. So existing systems of oversights and check-in should absolutely be maintained, but we also offer automated systems of check-in and communication, like Ripen milestones, which I'll give you a look at, so that participants are automatically asked to self-report on progress. On that note, this is where I'll get into a little bit more about actually using Ripen for these experiences. So at a very high level, we have 4 main buckets to this experience. There's the preparation and setup, getting your virtual placement described on our platform and connecting with employers, matching your students to their approved projects, managing those experiences through our platform. So tracking those milestone dates, as I mentioned, and monitoring communication. And then finally, reporting and evaluation. So all of these experiences are automatically tracked. You can report on the volume of activity and any feedback received. First step, and the very first step for anyone on this call who is interested, would of course be creating your promotional page on Ripen. I will be giving you a look at a couple solid examples from different institutions who have already done this. So creating your promotional page on Ripen to describe the opportunity to employers and basically let them know what types of projects they can propose and really pitch the opportunity to them. So let them know why they should get excited about it. I'll show you a couple good examples of those. Then there is, of course, the matching with employers. So sending requests to employers in our project library and receiving inbound requests from employers in our marketplace. I'll give you a look at that. Students will, I just want to clarify something that is often a misconception. So students aren't coming onto Ripen independently and browsing a big list of employers and reaching out to them directly. They are only viewing projects that have been approved by their WIL coordinator or by the institution. So they're viewing an approved list of projects that you have determined are suitable for the particular program area. Students will be assigned based on your own criteria. So if you have an interview process that would happen offline, Ripen doesn't currently facilitate that. So whether it's an interview process or other steps for matchmaking, you assign students to project based on your own criteria, but then Ripen allows you to invite those students to the approved projects either individually or in teams. One thing I would mention is that for employer interest, if you can streamline that matchmaking process at all, for example, in a team-based experience, an interview step may actually not be necessary. If an interview is an important part of your process, absolutely keep it, but streamlining that process to reduce the time commitment for employers to get set up will, of course, help to get more of them in the door and reduce drop-off. And then finally, under management, once the virtual internship is actually underway, communication can take place through video chat and messaging on the Ripen platform, and we also offer a meeting booking tool. But as I mentioned, you're not locked into this, so you can also choose to use other channels. If the employer wants to invite the student to their company Slack, to their Microsoft Teams, we would hope that they would do so, and that will help to create an additional feeling of workplace immersion. Milestone tracking through the Ripen platform is a really useful feature to make sure that both the employer and the institution have visibility to student progress. So that's the real value to doing the milestone tracking through Ripen, is that students will receive automatic reminders of important dates to meet during their placement. They will self-report progress, and both the employer and educator can see those. So these are available both for internship and team style experiences. And then finally, evaluation and feedback tools. So these are automated. At the end of the experience, both parties will be asked to provide feedback on their experience. You'll also have the opportunity to give feedback to the employer, which helps them build up a record on Ripen and helps them to get into programs like this in the future. One point that I think will be of very much of interest to everyone on this call is successfully reaching employers. So as I mentioned, Ripen has a network of 10,000 companies who we are able to reach with these types of opportunities. So once you have that page up on the Ripen platform, you have the ability to send requests in our marketplace. So we have a library of projects, which I'll give you a look at, in which you can request any project that is a good fit for the internship experience. You will also receive inbound requests from employers. We have a marketing and business development team who is reaching out to employers with these opportunities. So they will help to drive a lot of traffic towards those pages and get eyes on the opportunities. Of course, it is really a marketplace style, so it's important that we make the opportunity seem as attractive as possible to employers before that step happens. This is probably a good time to mention one of the things that we're doing in the coming weeks to promote these opportunities. April 16th, at the same time, we will be doing a webinar for employers. So in advance of that date, anyone who has their virtual placement advertised on Ripen will get that webinar link. And if you're able to send it out to your own employer network, we would absolutely love for you to do so and just help get more employers learning about how this could work. So that ties into the second point here, a new appeal to your existing employer network. While you may use Ripen to bring on new types of companies and companies that you've never worked with before, I would suggest that the employers who would ordinarily have applied and have not done so this year, or who have dropped out, are also great candidates for these experiences. If you can just give them a slightly alternate pitch, say, you might have expected an in-person placement, but I'm suggesting to you this virtual placement with these slightly reduced commitments. Would you consider this? So you can actually invite your own employers onto Ripen for free. So they don't have to pay any subscription fee to use Ripen, and they are also locked into your school portal. So if you invite a contact to your opportunity, they can't go off and apply to different schools. They can only apply to content from your school. We also have a client success team who is wonderful. If once your page is up, you will be introduced to a dedicated client success coordinator, and that individual helps you to find opportunities in our marketplace that may be a good fit, helps you to navigate the platforms, learn how to send requests and how to respond to requests that you receive, and they'll make tailored recommendations based on their understanding of your needs. So from here, oh, I'm a little ahead of schedule. So from here, I will be going into a couple examples on our platform. First up, I'd like to show you this example from Northeastern University in Boston. So they created this page, I'm going to say just over a month ago, for an extracurricular placement style experience. So this is something that is on the team-based side, and it's also on the lower number of hours. So this is a way to provide students with extracurricular experience at scale. So in this scenario, 5 students per team are each spending 20 hours. So 100 hours in total is being spent on each project. They have kept the scope relatively broad, but you'll see here they've given some really awesome examples of what students are capable of. So the primary purpose of this page is to pitch the experience to companies. I think that's the most important part to note. So this page is really all about addressing companies and telling them what they need to know and why they should get excited about participating. So they've given some awesome examples of things that companies could find really useful right now. Market research projects, comparative analysis for a given market against other similar entities, researching and recommending additional strategies to develop new practices, compiling, cleaning, processing, warehousing of data, all projects that would be really practical and useful for companies, but also importantly, I think all projects that could be achieved very well at a distance. It's also really important to note the company requirements. So when you're setting up your page on Ripen, you list everything the company must know to apply. And this would include things like if there is payment to the students and their time commitment. So everything the company needs to know to decide, am I able to meet these commitments? You'll see with Northeastern, we have 35 out of 40 projects confirmed. And if I go into this request tab here, you'll be able to see all of the requests that they have received and sent in our marketplace, a huge number. So they've received many requests from employers who are interested and attracted to their page and submitted projects. And then they've also gone out and sent requests in our project library. As the administrator for the page, you can accept or decline these requests from employers based on their suitability. And then only projects that are approved are going to be visible to students. So this projects tab here includes only those accepted requests. So students would only be able to view projects that have been screened and approved by the page coordinator. The projects here will describe in detail the business challenge or topic from the employer. So based on the examples you provided under the page details, the employer submits a project which details a real problem from their real company. Students will then be signed up directly to these projects on the platform, which allows them to get automated reminders of the milestone dates which the administrator set up for this experience. So you'll see in this case, there's a project planning review that should happen partway through. There's a draft deliverable due date before the final due date. Milestone, you can have up to 15, so it could be much more detailed. For example, we have another page where the students are self-reporting every week how much progress they've made. So the milestone is just asking the student to provide a comment of what they worked on this week. But it's really useful because it's automated. So students will be automatically reminded of this. And then both employers and the educators can see their response to that milestone. Another example is more traditional placement style. This is with Durham College in Ontario, Canada, Oshawa, for those who are familiar with the area. Durham College has set up a couple of similar pages to this, and theirs are perhaps more what you would expect for traditional placement. They are individual and they are 160 hours per student with third-year students. So in this scenario, they've done so marketing, of course, is always an attractive area for employers. They've given some great examples of the types of topics that students have skill in. This is a really important section because this is really where you can pitch what your students are capable of and help companies get an idea of what projects are suitable for the opportunity. So you can see they have 4 out of 12 projects locked in, but they've actually closed the page from further applications because they have a lot of interest. So currently they have 12 pending requests, where I'd assume the professor here is probably still in active discussion with the employer about these requests. This is a real success story. I love this page. They set this up 2 weeks ago on a Thursday, sent out 12 requests from our project library on the Friday, and by the following Tuesday, they already had 3 projects approved. So this can happen really quickly. We would definitely encourage you to get your pages up sooner than later and to begin sending requests and receiving them. It is, as I mentioned, a marketplace style, so we do our best to help you make the page as attractive as possible. But Durham College is a great example of a client who saw traction very quickly through this approach. I mentioned the project library. So while you receive inbound requests from employers who find your page and apply to it, you can also browse our project library, which is a list of hundreds of projects from employers that are currently looking to work with students. So all of these projects have been posted as projects. So when you're reaching out to them, you would request the project and ask them to consider running this as a virtual placement. In some cases, there may not be much difference, but it's important that when you make requests, you note if there's any payment required or any additional commitments from the employer. So we'll provide you with this template page. We have a template which just lays out all the key points that should really be noted in this page, and then you can simply duplicate this into your school portal and make any changes to it that are needed. So from here, I just wanted to mention a little bit about the feature set that helps support the experiences along the way. One that I wanted to show you live on the platform is our messages tool. So as I mentioned, when a student is added to a project, they're automatically launched into a Ripen message thread with the employer. So this can be individual or group messaging. They can send meeting invitations through the platform. They can start a video conference through the platform. They can message back and forth live or asynchronously. They will also receive email notifications for these. They can share files through the platform. And then any events such as the milestones or submissions that are done by the files that are uploaded by the students are also going to be tracked within this conversation. So all the activity happens in one place. But again, we don't lock you in here. So any communication channels that you would like to use outside of this, you're absolutely welcome to use. So just a couple more features from the platform. Milestones, as I mentioned, I think are going to be a really useful feature for administrators to help ensure that virtual placements remain on track and that you're easily able to report progress of individuals and teams. Here's just at a glance, this is what it looks like with multiple teams on a project. You can view at a glance the project of each team, and these of course could be individuals as well. View how many milestones they've completed, any feedback they've received, and easily download any work that they've uploaded if you need to do so. Each team has a page which is a repository of what they've done, so it tracks their submitted milestones, their upcoming milestones, and easily links them back to their existing chat groups on the Ripen platform. I mentioned the importance in the best practices section of establishing the communication channels ahead of time. So it's really important for administrators to set that expectation with employers, but it's also something that our team will be doing with employers. So when we onboard an employer, we're teaching them about the importance of establishing those communication channels, confirming how you'll be communicating and how often, whether that's using the right messaging tool here or using other channels. It's really important when it's virtual to make those communication channels super clear upfront. We have automated capturing of feedback as well. So the feedback in Ripen will be from student to employer and vice versa. Both parties have the opportunity to give each other feedback. So this again is something that will be, they will be automatically reminded to do. And that is in addition, if you have evaluation forms for employers that you would require them to do outside of Ripen, that's absolutely fine. That's something I would make sure to mention in your page commitments, but you can certainly continue to do so. We also help students to capture their experiences on a profile. So a student can always make this private if they prefer, but we know a huge reason why students do these placements is to be able to showcase the experience that they've received. So that any projects that they complete are automatically displayed on their profile if they've left it public, in addition to any feedback that they've received from employers. So as they do these projects, they can really, they have this page that they can share, whether it's linked to on their LinkedIn profile, included in a job application, used as a standalone profile. It helps to showcase all of the experience that they have had and helps them to show it off to prospective future employers. Employers who engage with students through Ripen automatically add those students to something called our talent pool. So they are building up a record of all the students that they are working with, the interests of those students, locations of those students, so that as they do more projects through Ripen, they have this pool of students they can send postings to, that they have a good experience with the virtual intern. They're added to that project, to that talent pool with the feedback score they received, and they can reach out to that student through our messages tool to send them future job opportunities as well. So just before we get to the Q&A, I imagine some of you are wondering what you would do next and how to get started. I think Daniela has already posted this in the chat, but first off, there is a direct link to book a meeting with a member of our team. So that second link there, the HubSpot link, will be provided to everyone. So you can book a meeting with a member of our team to discuss your virtual placement opportunity. And they'll be able to answer any of your more specific questions and help you to get set up. Or if you prefer, you can also email internships@ripen.com with questions or to arrange that first meeting. If you're already in contact with someone at Ripen, I'd encourage you just to reach back out to that person. And then finally, for those people who have or who feel comfortable with the platform and are ready to go, please just go to app.ripen.com/sign-up, and you can actually create your educator account and begin creating your course page today. We will always reach out to you to help review that page and consult on it. But you can begin creating a draft today, and then we'll look at that with you and provide any guidance if we think that any changes could be made. So thank you very much. I think I'm a few minutes ahead of schedule, but I hope I'm not too early. And Daniela, I can see that quite a few questions have been posted. So would you like to jump into the Q&A?
Yes, thank you, Emily, and thank you everyone who's been using the chat really actively. I apologize in advance of Emma, and I have not quite been able to get back to you, but we can jump into some of the questions that have been asked here. And also, as Emily mentioned, please don't hesitate to send us an email if we don't manage to get around to your questions today. We are happy to answer any and all questions you have at a later date. So Emily, to get started, one of the questions here is, how does Ripen differ from other systems like Handshake or Simplicity?
Thanks, Daniela. Great question. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but these platforms are usually used in complement to a system like Ripen. So 90% of our clients would actually use a platform like that in addition to Ripen. These are more slightly more traditional job board style platforms. So that would be where more company led. So the company goes on and posts their job description and students apply to it. Ripen is more educator led, as you saw. So the institution really defines the experience and then screens companies that apply to it. We also really focus on the project-based space. So while there are some more open-ended projects on Ripen, it is usually a project with a fixed start and end date. And as well, we focus very much more on the management of the experience, so project tracking and actually in-platform communication to complete the work provided.
Thanks, Emily. So there's a few questions about this topic. I think I'm going to do my best to cluster them together. There's questions around the employers and their interests so far in participating in virtual internships. So a lot of questions around why they would be looking to virtual internships, especially given the current situation. And then as a follow-up to that question, more specifically to the paid side of placements, we have a lot of questions around how that payment works. So is it to the individual students? Would it go to a group of students if they were working on a team? And then there was a question specifically around whether this would be done as a subsidy or if they would be receiving minimum wage placements. So if you could elaborate on how Ripen helps to manage that, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Danny. So I'm just jotting them down so I get to all of that. First off, on the point of employer interest, I did want to say we've been extremely fortunate on Ripen that we have not seen employers drop off from virtual experiences, which I think is a really, really good signal. So the employers we have engaged for project-based experiential learning have not been dropping off at the same rate that they have from placements, from in-person placements. So it's a strong signal that employers are able to meet that commitment of a virtual placement, because it is that little bit easier and that little bit less commitment from their end. We have, as I mentioned, that network of 10,000 employers that we will be marketing these opportunities to. So any pages that are posted on our platform, we will be promoting to our employer network, both those who are on the platform with projects. So if they have a suitable project, sending them to your page, and then those who don't have a project yet, just letting them know that this is available and something that they'll be interested in. The webinar is another strategy that we'll be using to reach them. We have very strong signals about employers' interest in virtual internships. I think very much for the same reasons that they would have done an in-person placement. Some of them have particular types of work that are really well suited to students, so particular projects that they would love to have completed by a student during the spring and summer that they would ordinarily have hired perhaps an in-person student for, that they would instead be very happy to have a virtual intern complete. We also have seen that the pages that have been posted on the Ripen platform so far have begun to receive applications. The Northeastern and Durham examples are two really great examples of that. But we will be continuing to basically drive user education and marketing campaigns towards those experiences over the coming weeks. Secondly, on the point about payment, so that is a really great question as regards to how that works with individuals versus groups. So if it is a paid internship, co-op replacement, in some cases, individual may make more sense because you'll probably, you'll have a minimum payment required. It could be very expensive for the employer to pay every single member of a group. Absolutely. In that case, it could be possible for an individual experience to make more sense. Some institutions would just require a stipend, in which case perhaps it's reasonable for the stipend to be split between the team members or for a small stipend to be awarded to each team member. When it comes to issues of payment, we leave that up to the institution, what your requirements are for your program. So whatever you have asked employers to pay for that experience before should be the same on Ripen, whether that is paying them an hourly wage or that is paying them a stipend or honorarium for the experience. So we don't set the expected payment terms, and payment would not actually be processed through Ripen. What we would just be doing is making sure that any employers we're marketing the experience to is aware of the payment commitment and agrees to it when they apply. Oh shoot, was there a third part to that question?
No, I think you answered it mostly around. The third part of it was the stipend versus minimum wage question. So just to reiterate on that, it would be up to the institution how they want to set, and we want to make sure that on Ripen you can showcase those commitments, but not necessarily mandate them. So I do want to get into some more of the questions. Again, there was a few about these, so I'm going to do my best to compile them. But there's questions around whether or not students can access internship opportunities directly, or if they have to go through their post-secondary institution as a way to do so.
Yeah, through Ripen, students do have to go through their post-secondary institution. We don't post these opportunities directly from employers. So it starts with the institution. You'd create your page describing what you're looking for, what students are capable of, what your required hours are, that sort of thing. Screen and approve projects, and then students are matched to those projects. So students would not be going directly into the Ripen project library and applying to projects directly.
Thank you, Emily. Just trying to keep up with the chat here. There's actually a few students who have joined us on the webinar, so I'm going to ask a question on their behalf. They're wondering if their school is not yet a partner, how can they work with their school to connect that school to Ripen?
That's an awesome question. I would encourage you to send, so whomever you're in touch with at your institution, whether it's your career services department or your field placement coordinator, I'd encourage you to send them our information. It should start with them, just because that is how Ripen works, is educator-led. So we would like to work with them to make sure this is a good fit and set up their page on our platform. But send them our information, and we'd be more than happy to take them through much of what I've gone over today and help them to get set up if they're interested in doing so.
Another question about whether or not we work with high schools or other types of educational institutions.
We do. We absolutely do. So we have worked with just a couple high schools in our history. Most of our experience is in the higher education space, and a student does need to be over 16 to use the Ripen platform. But we will absolutely work with high schools if it is the right type of opportunity. You may also be thinking about more non-traditional education partners. We've worked with workforce development agencies and employment agencies. One of our most active partners is Access Employment in Toronto, Canada, which works to create work integrated learning opportunities and course programming for new immigrants in the Toronto area. So we have worked with them to provide experiential learning opportunities for their students. You do not need to be in a higher education institution to use Ripen, so definitely let us know. If you're not certain if your program is a good fit, reach out and we can definitely speak about it.
Thanks, Emily. Actually, this is not necessarily a question, but more so just a point of clarification from Sewell, and thank you, Christine, for bringing this to our attention. Earlier in the webinar, Emily made a point that some institutions may be reducing their hours. Sewell did just want to clarify that there has been no formal guidance around reducing their hours, and this is up to each institution to determine if they would like to reduce their internship hours or not.
Absolutely. Thanks for clarifying that.
No problem. And this is, Emily, there's quite a bit of confusion around what Ripen typically works on. So I did just want to potentially take some time for you to review the difference between Ripen's traditional experiences and this new virtual internships that we've launched, specifically around the typical type of employers that we work with and what those experiences look like. The question is surrounding why there are so many industry partners in our network that are not typically participating in paid experiences and how these paid experiences are new. So I thought it would just be good to provide some clarity on what our typical experiences look like versus what we are doing with virtual internships now.
Yes, absolutely. So generally, the way Ripen works is not dramatically different from what I've described today, but instead of working with a placement coordinator or career services, we usually work with an instructor. So generally what we're doing is working with that instructor to take an assignment that is part of their coursework and bring a company partner into that. So students are doing a project, and it is generally in teams, so it can be individual as well. So students are doing a project for an industry partner for course credit. So it's not a separate extracurricular placement or co-op opportunity. It's our average is 40 hours, I believe, per student. So students are doing a project that's part of their coursework for an industry partner. Just about 80% of our employer network are small and medium businesses. So many of them actually do hire interns and co-ops, but they also participate in the Ripen format of experiential learning. It's lower commitments. They can actually do multiple of these throughout the year, while many employers of this size might hire 1 or 2 co-ops in the summer. They can do a Ripen experience working with 5 students or 20 students throughout the year. So I will say that I do think we will be reaching a slightly different subset of employers. Larger employers in particular are more used to hiring interns and co-op students. They're more used to hiring students for paid experience. With an in-class experience, we don't ask the employer for payment because it is for course credit and it's replacing an assignment the student would otherwise be doing in their class. But when it's extracurricular and it is generally part of a paid program, we'll be pitching this a little bit differently to our employer network. We need to make sure that they understand the payment requirement and that they're reading those terms carefully when they apply. So I expect it will be a lot of similar employers who are reaching for the in-class experiences, but we may also have a larger proportion of large employers who are more used to hiring co-op students.
Thanks, Emily. And again, with the employer networks, I was wondering if you could clarify for employers who are part of the institution's network already, what that process looks like and what type of access we would have to those employers and other institutions would have to those employers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would definitely reiterate the call to invite your employers to our webinar April 16th. Once you have your page up on the Ripen platform, you'll see a button on it that says invite companies. And what that allows you to do is invite employers who are not already on Ripen. So whether that's your alumni network or contacts through your career services offices, you can invite them directly to that opportunity. And what that provides them is a limited access license to Ripen. So most of our employers who are using Ripen, who we've brought on, they pay an annual subscription fee to the Ripen platform of about $1,000 is the typical rate. Employers who you invite do not pay anything. So they have free access to Ripen, which lets them create a profile, create projects, apply to courses. But the difference is they can only apply to courses from your school. So while they can see other content, they can only actually participate in content with the school that they were invited by. So they are protected in that sense. They're not going to be able to apply to just any virtual placement on Ripen. They can only apply to placements from your institution. Oh, and about what access we have to them, we are able to see their information because they do, or those of us who have access can see their information because they do have to sign up and actually create a profile on Ripen. But we're not going to be, marketing to them directly. we expect that they will be participating in your content and that it will be primarily your institution who will be communicating with them, with the exception of our client success team if and as they need to provide support to that user.
Thank you, Emily. And finally, there seems to be a lot of questions. I'm unfortunately not entirely sure that we can answer all of these questions, but a lot of questions around how virtual internships work for employment. So there's specifically a question around Canadian students working with, US students working with Canadian companies and what type of work permit requirements they would need for that. There was also an earlier question around international students and what type of work permits they would need.
Actually, that's a really good question, and I think what I better do is give you a partial answer, and we can perhaps answer that more fully over email. Generally, Ripen will not be handling employment contracts. So if generally your students would be signing an employment contract with an employer, that should be done outside of the Ripen platform. You can also set the parameters of where you want to work with employers from. So when you're setting up your page on Ripen, you can say, I only want employers from Canada, or I only want employers from Texas. You can set your parameters of where you want to source those employers from, and in that way, and exclude employers who are located in other areas. So that simplifies things a little bit. I think what I better do is just speak with our team and create like an FAQ answer around that. But generally, any practices that you would currently have with employers who hire for your employers who engage with students through your own placement programs, most of the same rules would apply.
Great, thank you, Emily. And then just to wrap up, a few more logistical questions. So how far in advance should the placement request be posted?
Yeah, so the earlier the better. It really is the simplest answer. There is no hard deadline at which we'll no longer accept your page. So if, for example, you're looking for placement starting May 1st, that gives us just under a month to promote it. That's pretty quick. So I'd absolutely encourage you to get your pages up as sooner than later. Generally, 1 to 2 months lead time is recommended. If you are, if you're operating with placements that are needing to be filled ASAP, you can certainly still post those pages. But if you have any flexibility around when the start date is, indicate that in your pages. That will give you a much better probability of receiving the number of placements that you're looking for.
Great, thank you, Emily. So I do see we have a few more questions here. I think a lot of these would be best for us to just follow up individually. So I did just want to remind everyone that you can email us at internships@ripen.com to connect. If you do want to, you're also welcome to book a meeting directly with us at the link that Emily shared earlier, and one of our team who is able to answer your questions will get in touch. So I am going to post the link to book a meeting in the chat here. And additionally, as I mentioned, you can always email us, or all of you have my email because of the webinar invitation. So you're welcome to use that as well, whatever is most convenient for you. And then I wanted to just make a final reminder that we will be hosting a webinar specific to industry partners. As Emily mentioned, this virtual internships is as new to our industry partners as it is to our academic partners. So this will be a similar type of information session on how they can leverage virtual internships during these challenging times. So that will be taking place at the exact same time as today on Thursday, April 16th. And I'll be sending the link to the sign up for that page right after this session. Along with that, some of the questions I didn't manage to get to were around recordings for the webinar. So we will be sending a recording of this webinar. It will also be shared through our social media channels, so you can access it there as well. And we will also be sharing a copy of Emily's slides. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to ask there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that recap, Daniela. And thank you everyone very much for your time. I will give you back 5 minutes here. And as mentioned, please do follow up with us. We'll be happy to answer any other questions and to get you set up for those of you who are interested in moving ahead.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.